A brilliant young architect is humiliated by powerful executives who mock her background and her dreams. The only person who defends her is a quiet man she assumes is the janitor. But when they discover who he really is, everything changes. Before we begin, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. And at the end, don't forget to rate this story from 0 to 10. Enjoy. Sofia Delgado had dreamed of this moment her entire life. She stood outside the executive boardroom on the 42nd floor of Monarch Development Corporation, clutching a folder of architectural plans against her chest like a shield. Through the frosted glass doors, she could see the silhouettes of the most powerful people in San Francisco's development industry. In exactly 3 minutes, she would walk into that room and present the project she'd been working on for 6 months. The project that could change everything, not just for her career, but for thousands of families who deserved better than what the housing market currently offered them. Greenway Commons, affordable, sustainable housing for working-class families. Beautiful design that didn't sacrifice dignity for cost savings. Solar integration, green spaces, modular construction that could be replicated across the country. It was the kind of project Sofia had dreamed about since she was 8 years old, doing homework in empty conference rooms while her mother vacuumed the floors around her. Her phone buzzed, a text from her mother, Carmen. "Good luck today, mija. I'm so proud of you. Show them what a Delgado can do." Sofia smiled, feeling tears prick at her eyes. She blinked them back. No crying. Not today. Today she needed to be strong. She straightened her blazer, the nicest one she owned, bought secondhand but carefully tailored to fit perfectly, and took a deep breath. "You've got this," she whispered to herself. "You belong here." The door opened, and Richard Ashworth's assistant appeared. "Miss Delgado, they're ready for you." Sofia nodded, squared her shoulders, and walked into the room. The Monarch boardroom was designed to intimidate. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the San Francisco skyline. The table was a single slab of polished mahogany that probably cost more than Sofia's annual salary. The chairs were leather, the lighting was dramatic, and every surface gleamed with the kind of wealth that announced itself without saying a word. At the head of the table sat Richard Ashworth, CEO of Monarch Development. He was 63 years old, silver-haired, and had the kind of tan that came from golf courses and yacht decks. He didn't stand when Sofia entered, neither did anyone else. To his right sat Victoria Price, Chief Design Officer. She was impeccably dressed in Chanel, her blonde hair swept back in a perfect chignon. She looked at Sofia the way someone might look at a stain on an expensive carpet. To Richard's left was Harrison Wells, the CFO, already, flipping through Sofia's financial projections with a skeptical expression. Beyond him sat 4 other board members whose names Sofia had memorized, but who hadn't bothered to learn hers. "Miss Delgado," Richard said, gesturing vaguely toward the presentation screen. "You have 20 minutes. Let's see what you've got." No introduction, no welcome. Just a stopwatch mentality that made it clear her time was already being wasted. Sofia set up her laptop with practiced efficiency, trying to ignore the way her hands wanted to tremble. "Thank you for the opportunity to present today," she began, clicking to her first slide. "I'd like to introduce you to Greenway Commons, a revolutionary approach to sustainable, affordable housing." She launched into her presentation with all the confidence she could muster. She talked about the housing crisis, about the 3 million families in California alone who couldn't afford decent homes, about the environmental impact of traditional construction and the opportunity to do better. She showed them her designs, clean, modern buildings that didn't look like projects, green spaces that would bring communities together. Solar panels integrated seamlessly into the architecture, modular construction techniques that would cut building time by 40% and costs by 30%. The average unit would be priced at 60% of market rate, Sophia explained, clicking to her financial projections. With tax incentives and grant funding, we could break even within 7 years while providing homes for over 2,000 families. She paused, looking around the room for reactions. Richard was checking his phone. Victoria was examining her manicure. Harrison had stopped even pretending to look at the projections. Only one person seemed to be paying attention. In the corner of the room, an older man in simple work clothes was replacing a light bulb in one of the wall sconces. He had silver hair, kind eyes, and the weathered hands of someone who'd worked with them his whole life. Maintenance staff, Sophia assumed, a janitor or electrician. He caught her eye and gave her a small, encouraging nod. Sophia felt a flicker of warmth. At least someone was listening. She continued with renewed determination, walking through the construction timeline, the partnership opportunities, the potential for replication in other cities. In conclusion, she said, clicking to her final slide, Greenway Commons represents an opportunity for Monarch to lead the industry in sustainable, affordable housing. We can do well by doing good. We can prove that beautiful, dignified homes don't have to be reserved for the wealthy. She stopped, her heart pounding. Silence. Richard set down his phone and leaned back in his chair, a small smile playing at his lips. It was not a kind smile. "Miss Delgado," he said slowly, "that was quite a presentation." "Thank you, sir. I'm happy to answer any questions about—" "Oh, I have questions." Richard glanced at Victoria, who was now openly smirking. "For starters, do you actually think this is the kind of project Monarch Development pursues?" Sophia felt her stomach clench. "Sir, I believe it aligns with the company's stated commitment to innovative design and community impact." "Community impact," Victoria cut in, her voice dripping with condescension. "How touching. Tell me, Miss Delgado, do you understand what Monarch's clients actually want?" "I believe there's a market for—" "Our clients want prestige, exclusivity. They want buildings that make statements about success." Victoria leaned forward. "They don't want to be associated with housing projects." The emphasis she put on those words made Sophia's skin crawl. "Greenway Commons isn't a housing project," Sophia said, fighting to keep her voice steady. "It's thoughtfully designed, sustainable architecture that happens to be affordable." "It's social work," Harrison interrupted, tossing her financial projections onto the table dismissively. "These margins are laughable. 7 years to break even? Our investors expect returns in 3. The tax incentives and grant funding would—" "Grants." Richard laughed, and several board members joined in. "You want Monarch Development to go begging for grants like some non-profit? Do you have any idea how that would look?" Sophia stood frozen at the front of the room, feeling the walls closing in. "With respect, sir, I think there's a growing market for—" "Miss Delgado." Victoria stood up, smoothing her skirt with deliberate slowness. "Let me be direct with you. This project is completely unsuitable for Monarch. The design is pedestrian. The financials are fantasy. And frankly, the entire concept shows a fundamental misunderstanding of who we are and what we do. I've researched Monarch's founding principles extensively," Sophia said, her voice stronger now. "James Whitmore started this company specifically to serve underserved communities. His first major project was affordable housing in Oakland. James Whitmore hasn't been involved in this company for 15 years, Richard snapped. "He's a relic, a name on a building. What he wanted decades ago is irrelevant to what Monarch is today." Sophia opened her mouth to respond, but Victoria wasn't finished. "You know, I have to wonder about your motivations here, Miss Delgado." Victoria walked slowly around the table, her heels clicking against the marble floor. This fixation on affordable housing, on working-class families, it's all very personal, isn't it? Sophia felt ice in her veins. I don't understand what you mean. I mean that perhaps you'd be more comfortable designing something within your cultural experience. Victoria smiled, and it was the cruelest expression Sophia had ever seen. Taquerias, perhaps. Quinceañera halls. Something more familiar to your background. The room was silent. No one objected. No one even looked uncomfortable. Sophia couldn't breathe. The racism was so blatant, so casual, that for a moment she wondered if she'd imagined it. That's, her voice cracked. That's completely inappropriate. What's inappropriate, Richard said coldly, is wasting this board's time with a project that has no place at a company like Monarch. Someone from your background couldn't possibly understand what our clients want, what they need, what they're willing to pay for. Someone from my background, Sophia repeated. And what background is that exactly? Don't play games, Miss Delgado. We all know where you came from. Scholarship student, first generation. Your mother was a cleaning woman, wasn't she? Richard's smile was thin and sharp. Perhaps that's why you're so interested in buildings for people who clean buildings. Laughter rippled around the table. Victoria covered her mouth in mock embarrassment. Harrison didn't even try to hide his amusement. Sophia felt tears burning in her eyes. She would not cry. She would not give them the satisfaction. My mother worked harder than anyone in this room, she said, her voice shaking despite her best efforts. She raised me alone. She taught me that dignity isn't about money. How inspirational, Victoria interrupted. But dignity doesn't pay the bills, does it? And neither will this project. We're done here. The answer is no, Miss Delgado, Richard said, already turning back to his phone, permanently. And I'd suggest you reconsider whether Monarch is really the right fit for someone with your priorities. The dismissal was clear. Sophia was being told that not only was her project rejected, but her position at the company was in jeopardy. She stood there, frozen, unable to move. And then from the corner of the room, a voice spoke. Excuse me. Everyone turned. The older man, the one Sophia had assumed was maintenance staff, had set down his tools and stepped forward. He didn't look intimidated. He didn't look apologetic. He looked curious, interested, and completely unafraid. I've been listening to this presentation, he said calmly, and I have a question. Richard's face contorted with annoyance. This is a closed meeting. Please finish your work and leave. The man ignored him entirely. He walked toward Sophia, his eyes on the presentation screen. These profit margins, he said, pointing at her financial slide, they're based on traditional construction costs, aren't they? Sophia blinked, thrown by the sudden shift. Yes, industry standard estimates. But you mentioned modular construction, prefabricated units. The man tilted his head, studying the numbers. If you used a prefab approach with standardized components, wouldn't that reduce your building timeline by closer to 45%? Maybe 50%? Sophia's heart skipped. Yes. I have detailed projections for that in my appendix. I didn't include them in the main presentation because you assumed they wouldn't ask. The man nodded. Understandable. And the solar integration. You're using the new thin film panels, aren't you? The ones that got regulatory approval last quarter? You know about those? The man smiled. It transformed his weathered face, making his eyes sparkle with warmth. I read a lot. I don't know who you think you are, Richard said loudly, standing from his chair. But this is completely inappropriate. Security. The cost per watt on thin film has dropped 40% in the last 2 years. The man continued, ignoring Richard entirely. Your projections probably don't account for that. With updated numbers, you could hit profitability in 5 years, not 7. Sophia stared at him. How do you know all this? Like I said, I read. The man turned to face the board and something in his expression shifted. The warmth was still there, but underneath it was steel. I've read everything about sustainable construction for the past 20 years. I've watched this industry evolve, and I've never, not once, seen a project with this much potential presented by someone with this much vision. He looked directly at Richard. What I have seen many times is talented people being torn down by small-minded executives who are more interested in protecting their positions than building something meaningful. Richard's face went purple. That's enough. You're fired. I want your supervisor's name, your employee ID, and I want you out of this building in the next 5 minutes. The man didn't react. He simply turned back to Sophia, and his voice softened. Your design is remarkable, he said quietly. The way you've integrated green space with high-density housing, the attention to community flow, the respect for the people who'll actually live there. He shook his head slowly. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Don't let them make you small. Then he picked up his tools, nodded once to Sophia, and walked out of the boardroom. The silence he left behind was deafening. Well, Victoria said finally, her voice brittle. That was bizarre. Richard, you should really speak to facilities management about their hiring practices. Oh, I intend to. Richard's jaw was tight with fury. Miss Delgado, this meeting is over. Get out. Sophia gathered her things mechanically, her mind still reeling. The humiliation of the meeting had been temporarily overshadowed by the strange intervention of the maintenance man. How had he known so much? Why had he risked his job to defend her? And why did something about him feel so familiar? She walked out of the boardroom in a daze, clutching her folder of plans against her chest. Behind her, she heard Richard's voice. Someone find out who that man was. I want him gone. Sophia made it to her desk before the tears came. She sat in her small cubicle, surrounded by the drawings and models she'd spent months perfecting, and let herself cry. Not loud, dramatic sobs, just quiet tears that she wiped away before anyone could see. Sophia, Marcus Chen, the only other junior architect who'd ever been kind to her, appeared at her cubicle entrance. His face was full of concern. I heard what happened. Are you okay? I'm fine. She wasn't fine. She was devastated. That was brutal. I've never seen the board go after someone like that. Marcus lowered his voice. The things Victoria said, that was way over the line. You could file a complaint. With who? HR? Sophia laughed bitterly. Victoria plays golf with the HR director. Richard probably signs her bonus checks. Marcus had no answer for that. They both knew how the system worked. What about that old guy? Marcus asked after a moment. The one who spoke up for you, did you know him? No. I thought he was just the janitor. But he knew things, Marcus. Technical things about my project that even I hadn't fully calculated yet. That's weird. Very weird. Sophia wiped her eyes and took a deep breath. I need to find out who he was. She spent the next hour asking around the building. She checked with facilities management, with the front desk, with the security team. No one knew who the older man was. The maintenance department said they hadn't had anyone working on the executive floor that day. It was like he'd appeared from nowhere. Sophia went back to her computer and started digging through Monarch's internal database. She searched for employees named James. The man had seemed to react when Richard mentioned James Whitmore. Maybe there was a connection. What she found made her freeze. Old company photos from the 1980s when Monarch was first founded. A young man with dark hair and bright eyes standing in front of a construction site, grinning at the camera. James Whitmore, founder and original CEO. Sophia clicked through more photos. She watched the young man age through decades of company history. The hair went gray, then silver. The face gained lines, but the eyes, those kind, intelligent eyes, stayed the same. She pulled up his official biography. James Whitmore founded Monarch Development in 1985, starting as a contractor's son with nothing but ambition and vision. He built the company into one of the most respected architecture firms in the country, known for innovative design and community-focused development. His first major project was affordable housing in Oakland, the same kind of project Sophia had just been mocked for proposing. In 2009, after the death of his wife Eleanor, James stepped back from daily operations. He retained majority ownership but handed control to a management team led by Richard Ashworth. He now lives privately and rarely involves himself in company affairs. Current net worth, $4.2 billion. Sophia stared at the screen, her heart pounding. The janitor wasn't a janitor. The janitor was James Whitmore, the founder, the majority shareholder, the man whose name was literally on the building. And he had just defended her, a nobody junior architect, against the CEO he'd put in charge of his company. Why? Sophia pulled up the most recent photo she could find of James Whitmore. It was from 5 years ago at some charity gala. He looked older than in the founding photos, but it was unmistakably the same man she'd seen in the boardroom. The same kind eyes, the same gentle smile, the same quiet dignity. She sat back in her chair, mind racing. James Whitmore had been in that meeting disguised as maintenance staff. He'd watched his own executives tear apart a young architect. And then he'd spoken up, knowing it would blow his cover. He'd gotten himself fired from his own company. Why? What was he doing? What was he looking for? And why had he chosen to help her? Sophia's phone buzzed, an email from an address she didn't recognize. Subject: Don't give up. She opened it. Miss Delgado, don't give up on Greenway Commons. The right people will see its value. Your design is exactly what this industry needs, what this company was supposed to be about. The people who tried to tear you down today don't represent what Monarch could be. They represent what it's become. There's a difference. Keep your plans, keep your vision, and most importantly, keep your dignity. You have more of it than everyone in that boardroom combined. J. Sophia read the email 3 times. J. James. James Whitmore was watching. James Whitmore believed in her project. James Whitmore, the reclusive billionaire founder who hadn't been involved in Monarch for 15 years, had chosen today to come out of hiding. And somehow, impossibly, he'd chosen her. Sophia didn't know what it meant. She didn't know what came next. But for the first time since walking out of that boardroom, she felt something other than despair. She felt hope. That night, Sophia went home to the small apartment she shared with her mother. Carmen was in the kitchen cooking something that smelled like home, rice and beans and the chicken mole she made for special occasions. Mija, Carmen's face lit up when Sophia walked in. How did it go? Tell me everything. Sophia looked at her mother, this woman who had worked so hard for so long, who had cleaned buildings for 30 years so her daughter could design them, who was now dealing with arthritis so bad she could barely hold a pen. She couldn't tell her the truth. Not yet, not all of it. It was complicated, Sophia said, forcing a smile, but I think something good might come out of it. I knew it. I knew they would see how talented you are. Carmen pulled her into a hug. Come, eat. Tell me about the important men in their fancy suits. Sophia ate dinner with her mother, listening to Carmen's stories about her own day, the neighbor's new dog, the church fundraiser she was helping organize, the telenovela plot twist that had everyone in her sewing circle talking. Normal things. Simple things. The kind of life Carmen had built from nothing, through sheer determination and love. Later, after Carmen had gone to bed, Sophia sat on their tiny balcony looking out at the city lights. James Whitmore had built an empire from nothing too. He'd started with the same kind of background, working-class family, no connections, no advantages. He'd created Monarch specifically to help communities like the one Sophia had grown up in. And then something had gone wrong. He'd stepped away and the company had become everything he'd built it to fight against. Now he was back, in disguise, watching, waiting. For what? Sophia pulled out her phone and opened the email from Jay. She typed a reply. Mr. Whitmore, I know it's you. Thank you for what you said today. No one has ever defended me like that, especially not someone who had so much to lose. I don't understand why you're doing this, why you were there, why you were pretending to be someone else, why you chose to help me. But I want you to know that I'm not giving up. On Greenway Commons or on myself, if you want to talk, I'm listening. Sofia Delgado. She hit send before she could second-guess herself. The reply came within minutes. Miss Delgado, meet me tomorrow evening, 7 p.m. The old Monarch construction site on Harrison Street, the one they abandoned 3 years ago. Come alone, I'll explain everything. J. Sophia stared at the message. This was either the beginning of something extraordinary or the setup for a very strange kidnapping. She thought about her mother, about the years of sacrifice, about the project she'd poured her heart into and the people who'd tried to destroy her for it. Then she typed, I'll be there. She didn't sleep much that night, but when she did, she dreamed of buildings rising from empty lots, of families moving into homes with gardens and light, of her mother walking through rooms designed with dignity, finally seeing the world Sophia had always promised to build. When she woke up, the fear was still there, but so was the hope, and that was enough. What do you think of the board's cruelty and the mysterious janitor's defense? Share your thoughts in the comments. On a scale from 0 to 10, how would you rate this story so far? Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications to keep up with all our stories. The abandoned construction site on Harrison Street was a monument to failure. 3 years ago, Monarch had broken ground on what was supposed to be a luxury condominium complex. But funding fell through, permits got tangled, and the project was quietly shelved. Now it sat empty, a skeleton of steel beams and concrete foundations wrapped in chain-link fence and slowly being reclaimed by weeds. Sophia arrived at 6:45, 15 minutes early. She wasn't sure what she was expecting. A secret meeting with a billionaire felt like something out of a movie, not real life. Part of her still wondered if this was some kind of elaborate prank. But she'd come anyway, because she needed answers. She found a gap in the fence and slipped through, picking her way carefully across the uneven ground. The setting sun cast long shadows across the abandoned site, turning the exposed beams into abstract sculptures of light and dark. You came. Sophia spun around. James Whitmore stood a few feet away, dressed simply in khakis and a worn flannel shirt. Without the maintenance uniform, he looked different, still unassuming, but there was a quiet authority in the way he held himself. Mr. Whitmore, Sophia said. Or should I call you something else, since apparently you like to pretend to be other people? James smiled. James is fine, and I suppose I deserve that. You suppose? Sophia crossed her arms. I spent all night trying to figure out what's going on. You're worth $4 billion. You founded the company. And you were in that boardroom pretending to change light bulbs while your executives... She stopped, emotion rising in her throat. While they said those things to me? I know. James's smile faded. I heard every word and I'm sorry you had to experience that. Then why didn't you stop them sooner? Why didn't you tell them who you were? James was quiet for a moment. He walked toward one of the exposed steel beams and ran his hand along its surface. "Do you know why this project failed?" he asked. Sophia frowned at the change of subject. "I heard there were financing issues." "There were, but that's not the real reason." James turned to face her. "This was supposed to be affordable housing, mixed income, sustainable, community-focused. I approved the initial plans myself 5 years ago before I fully stepped away." Sophia felt her stomach drop. "What happened?" "Richard happened. Victoria happened. The board happened." James's voice hardened. "They decided that affordable housing wasn't prestigious enough for Monarch. So they quietly changed the plans, converted it to luxury condos, and then, when the financing for that fell through, they blamed the original concept and buried the whole thing." He gestured at the abandoned site around them. "This is what's left of my vision. This is what they did to the company I built." Sophia looked at the rusting beams, the cracked concrete, the weeds pushing through every gap. It was a graveyard of good intentions. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. "Because I want you to understand why I was in that boardroom and why I'm here now." James walked toward a concrete barrier and sat down, gesturing for Sophia to join him. After a moment's hesitation, she did. "When Eleanor died," he began, his voice softer now, "I lost more than my wife. I lost my purpose. She was the one who pushed me to start Monarch in the first place. Said I was wasting my talent building other people's dreams." He pulled out his wallet and showed Sophia a faded photograph. A beautiful woman with warm eyes and dark hair, laughing at the camera. "She was Latina," Sophia said, surprised. "Like me. Like you, from a working-class family just like yours." James looked at the photo with infinite tenderness. "She grew up in the Mission District. Her father was a mechanic. Her mother cleaned houses." Sophia felt something shift in her chest. "I didn't know that. Most people don't. The company history focuses on me, the founder, the visionary." James put the photo away. "But Eleanor was the heart of Monarch. She's the one who insisted we focus on communities that needed us, not just clients who could pay us." "What happened after she died?" James sighed. "I fell apart. I couldn't walk into the office without seeing her everywhere. So I stepped back. I told myself I was giving the next generation a chance to lead, but really I was running away." He looked out at the abandoned site. "I trusted Richard. I trusted Victoria. I thought they would honor what we'd built." His jaw tightened. "I was wrong. So why not fire them? You're the majority shareholder. You have the power." "Because I didn't know how bad it had gotten, I stayed away. I stopped paying attention by the time I realized what was happening." He shook his head. "I needed to see it for myself, to understand the full scope of what they'd done. That's why you were pretending to be maintenance staff." "Yes. I've been doing it for 3 months, visiting different departments, different floors. Watching, listening, learning." Sophia thought about that. A billionaire, voluntarily invisible, doing the work that people like her mother did every day. "What have you learned?" she asked. "That Monarch is rotten from the top down. Richard has been awarding inflated contracts to companies he has stakes in. Victoria has been systematically driving out any architect who doesn't fit her idea of company culture, which, based on what I've seen, means anyone who isn't white and wealthy. That's illegal. You could go to the authorities. I could. But I want to do more than just remove a few bad actors. I want to rebuild Monarch into what it was supposed to be." James turned to face her directly. "And I can't do that alone." Sophia's heart began to pound. "What are you asking me?" "I'm asking you to help me. Not just to take down Richard and the board, but to build something better in its place. Mr. Whitmore, James, I'm a junior architect. I've been at Monarch for 3 years. I have no power, no connections, no... You have something more important. James cut her off. You have vision, you have integrity, and you have a project that could change thousands of lives. He reached into his bag and pulled out a folder. Inside were copies of Sophia's Greenway Commons plans, the ones she'd presented to the board. I reviewed these last night, he said. Every page, every calculation, every design choice. And they're remarkable. The integration of sustainable systems with community spaces. The way you've designed for density without sacrificing dignity. The financial model that actually works if you use current technology costs. James shook his head slowly. This isn't just a good project, Sophia. This is the best affordable housing proposal I've seen in 20 years. Sophia felt tears prick at her eyes. No one had ever said anything like that about her work. Ever. The board rejected it, she said, her voice thick. The board are fools, and soon they won't be the board anymore. What do you mean? James leaned forward. The annual shareholders meeting is in 2 weeks. That's when I make my move. But between now and then I need to gather evidence. Documentation of everything they've done. The corruption, the discrimination, the betrayal of Monarch's founding principles. You want me to help you gather evidence? I want you to help me build a case so airtight that no one can challenge it. And then when the board is gone, I want you to lead the sustainable housing division. Sophia stared at him. I'm 28 years old. I've been an architect for 4 years. So, I was 26 when I started Monarch. Age isn't what matters, vision matters, integrity matters. The willingness to do what's right even when it's hard. That matters. James held her gaze. You have all of those things, Sophia. I saw it in your presentation. I saw it in the way you stood up to them even when they were tearing you apart. Sophia was quiet for a long moment. The sun had nearly set now, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Why me? She finally asked. You could hire investigators, lawyers, consultants. Why ask a junior architect to help you take down a corrupt board? James smiled, a sad, gentle smile. Because you remind me of Eleanor. Because you understand what Monarch was supposed to be about, and because... He paused. Because when I was in that boardroom watching them humiliate you, I saw myself. 60 years ago, I was a contractor's kid trying to break into an industry that didn't want me. I know what it feels like to be told you don't belong. He stood up, brushing off his pants. I can't force you to help me, Sophia, but I'm asking. Because I think together we could do something extraordinary. Sophia looked at this man, this billionaire who dressed like a janitor and spoke like a teacher and looked at her like she was worth something. She thought about her mother, about the 30 years Carmen had spent cleaning buildings she would never be allowed to live in, about the dreams Sophia had carried since childhood, dreams of building homes for people like them. She thought about Greenway Commons, about the 2,000 families who could live there, about the dignity they deserved. And she thought about Richard Ashworth's sneering face, about Victoria Price's cruel smile, about the laughter that had echoed around that boardroom while they tore her apart. Okay, she said, I'll help you. James's face lit up. You will? On one condition. Name it. When this is over, when the board is gone and Monarch is rebuilt, I don't want charity. I don't want to be handed a position because you feel sorry for me. Sophia stood up, meeting his eyes. I want to earn it. I want to prove I belong. James nodded slowly, respect clear in his expression. That's exactly what I would have said at your age. Then we have a deal? We have a deal. He extended his hand. Sophia shook it. His grip was firm and warm, the grip of someone who'd worked with his hands his whole life, even after he didn't have to anymore. "So," she said, "what do we do first?" James smiled. "First we gather evidence, then we clean house." The next 2 weeks were the most intense of Sophia's life. By day she worked at Monarch like nothing had changed, keeping her head down, doing her assignments, avoiding Victoria's suspicious glances. By night she met with James at various locations around the city, poring over documents and building their case. James had access to everything. Decades of financial records, email archives, personnel files, the kind of information that would normally require a team of forensic accountants to analyze. But Sophia had something James didn't. She was inside the company. She could access current files, overhear conversations, observe the day-to-day corruption that the official records couldn't capture. "Look at this," she said one evening, spreading printouts across James's kitchen table. They'd moved their meetings to his home, a modest house in the Sunset District, not the mansion Sophia had expected. Victoria's been rejecting diverse candidates at 3 times the rate of white candidates. And the reasons she gives are completely subjective. Not a cultural fit. Lacks executive presence. Wouldn't mesh with the team. James examined the data, his expression grim. "This is exactly what I suspected, but we need more than statistics. We need specific instances." "I have those too." Sophia pulled out another folder. "I talked to Marcus. He's a friend, someone I trust. He gave me names of architects who were pushed out. I've been reaching out to them quietly. And 3 have agreed to provide statements. One of them has emails from Victoria explicitly telling her that her background made clients uncomfortable. Her background? She's black, graduated top of her class from Yale." Sophia's voice was bitter. Apparently that wasn't enough to make her a cultural fit. James shook his head slowly. "Eleanor would have been heartbroken to see what they've done to her company." They worked through the night, organizing evidence into categories: financial impropriety, discrimination, mismanagement, betrayal of fiduciary duty. By dawn, they had a comprehensive dossier that would be damning to anyone who read it. But as the shareholders' meeting approached, Sophia grew increasingly nervous. "What if it's not enough?" she asked one evening. "What if they have lawyers who can explain everything away? What if the shareholders don't care?" "The shareholders will care," James said with quiet confidence. "Most of them invested in Monarch because of what it stood for. They've been fed lies about the company's direction for years. When they see the truth." "But Richard has connections, power. He's been running the company for 15 years. And I've been building it for 40. James met her eyes. "Trust me, Sophia. I know what I'm doing." She wanted to believe him, but doubt gnawed at her. One night, about a week before the shareholders' meeting, Sophia invited James to dinner at her apartment. Carmen had been asking about the friend Sophia kept meeting, and Sophia decided it was time for them to meet. She hadn't told her mother who James really was. As far as Carmen knew, he was just a colleague who was helping Sophia with a project. When James arrived, he was dressed simply, carrying a bottle of wine and a bouquet of flowers. Carmen opened the door and froze. "Senor Whitmore," she whispered. Sophia looked between them, startled. "Mama, you know him!" Carmen's eyes filled with tears. "I worked at Monarch for 12 years, mija. Mr. Whitmore was..." She shook her head, overcome with emotion. "He was always kind. He remembered our names. He asked about our families." James stepped forward and took Carmen's hands gently. "Carmen Delgado. You worked the executive floor. You made the best coffee in the building. And if I remember correctly, you had a daughter who used to do homework in the conference rooms while you cleaned." Carmen burst into sobs. James pulled her into a hug, holding her like an old friend. Sophia stood frozen, watching this impossible scene. "Mama," she managed, "why didn't you ever tell me?" Carmen pulled back, wiping her eyes. "Tell you what, mija? That you knew him. That he was kind?" Carmen smiled through her tears. "Because kindness shouldn't need to be announced. It just is." She ushered James inside, fussing over him, insisting he sit in the good chair. Sophia watched, still trying to process what was happening. "Your mother is remarkable," James said quietly as Carmen bustled in the kitchen. "She always was. What happened between you two? She seems like she knows you well." James was quiet for a moment. "Do you know why you still have health insurance through Monarch?" Sophia frowned. "Because I'm an employee? Your mother hasn't worked at Monarch in 8 years, but she still has coverage, full benefits." "That's not possible. She was just a cleaning staff. There's no way." 12 years ago, your mother got very sick. Pneumonia that turned into something worse. She couldn't work for 2 months. James looked at Sophia with gentle eyes. "Most companies would have fired her, but I personally ensured she kept her job and her insurance. And when she had to stop working because of her arthritis, I made sure her benefits continued." Sophia felt like the floor had dropped out from under her. "That was you?" she whispered. "It was the right thing to do." Carmen had given Monarch 12 years of loyal service. She deserved better than to be thrown away when she needed help. She never told me. I never knew. She didn't know either, not for certain. I asked HR to keep it quiet. James smiled sadly. Some things shouldn't require recognition. They should just be done. Sophia sank into a chair, her mind reeling. All those years. All those times she'd worried about her mother's medical bills, about the insurance coverage that seemed too good to be true. It had been James. This man she'd met a week ago had been quietly protecting her family for over a decade. "Why?" she asked. "You didn't even know me." "I knew your mother. I knew she was raising a daughter alone, working nights so that little girl could have a better life." James's voice was rough with emotion. "I saw her cleaning the boardroom after everyone else had gone home. I saw how tired she was. And I saw the homework spread across the conference table, math problems and drawings of buildings." Sophia felt tears streaming down her face. "You saw my drawings?" "I saw everything. I saw a little girl who dreamed of building things being raised by a mother who cleaned them." James reached out and touched her hand. "That's why I was in the boardroom last week. That's why I spoke up, because I've been watching you for years, Sophia. And I knew that if anyone could carry on what Eleanor and I started, it was you." Sophia couldn't speak. The weight of what he was saying, that her entire path had been shaped by this man's quiet interventions, was overwhelming. Carmen returned from the kitchen with plates of food, and the conversation shifted to lighter things. They ate together, talked about Carmen's sewing circle, about James's late wife, about Sophia's childhood dreams. But underneath it all, Sophia felt something fundamental shifting. She wasn't just helping James take down a corrupt board anymore. She was carrying on a legacy that had been protecting her family for years. After dinner, James helped Carmen wash dishes while Sophia sat on the balcony processing everything. James joined her eventually, 2 cups of coffee in hand. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner," he said, handing her a cup. "About your mother, about all of it." "Why didn't you?" "Because I wanted you to trust me for who I am now, not for what I did in the past." He sat beside her. "And because I wanted you to know that your achievements are your own. I didn't help you get into Berkeley. I didn't help you get hired at Monarch. Everything you've accomplished, you did yourself." Sophia looked at him. "But you helped create the conditions. The insurance that kept my mother alive. The benefits that let me focus on school instead of worrying about medical bills. I helped create conditions. You did the rest. James met her eyes. Don't let anyone, including me, take credit for what you've built. They sat in comfortable silence, looking out at the city lights. James, Sophia said finally, I'm scared. Of what? Of everything, the shareholders' meeting. Going up against Richard and Victoria, the possibility that it might not work. She took a shaky breath. I've never been part of anything this big. What if I let you down? You won't. You can't know that. I know you. James turned to face her. I know that you stood in front of people who wanted to destroy you and didn't back down. I know that you've been working 18-hour days for 2 weeks, building a case that would make any lawyer proud. And I know that you love Monarch, the real Monarch, the one we're trying to save, more than any of the people currently running it. He put his hand on her shoulder. Eleanor believed in me when no one else did. She saw what I could become before I saw it myself. His voice softened. I see the same thing in you, Sophia. Not just talent, that's everywhere, but heart, purpose, the willingness to fight for what matters. Sophia felt tears threatening again. I don't know if I'm ready. No one's ever ready, but you show up anyway. That's what courage is. She nodded slowly, drawing strength from his certainty. 1 week, she said. 1 week until the shareholders' meeting. 1 week, James agreed, and then we change everything. They sat together on the balcony until the stars came out, planning and preparing and dreaming of the company Monarch could become. Inside, Carmen watched them through the window, a gentle smile on her face. She didn't know exactly what they were planning, but she knew her daughter had finally found someone who believed in her. And sometimes that was all anyone needed to become who they were meant to be. What do you think of James's secret connection to Sophia's family? Share your thoughts in the comments. On a scale from 0 to 10, how would you rate this story so far? Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications to keep up with all our stories. The days before the shareholders' meeting blurred together in a haze of preparation and anxiety. Sophia and James met every evening, refining their strategy, rehearsing their presentation, anticipating every possible counterattack. James's modest house in the Sunset District had become their war room. Papers spread across every surface, laptops open, coffee cups multiplying like rabbits. Walk me through it again, James said one night, leaning back in his chair. The sequence of events. Sophia stood at the whiteboard they'd set up in his living room, marker in hand. First, you enter during Richard's opening remarks. Make it dramatic. He'll be mid-sentence about the company's strong leadership. That's when you walk in. And then, you take control of the meeting, invoke your shareholder rights, demand the floor. Richard will try to shut me down, which is when I present the evidence. Sophia tapped the stack of folders on the table. Financial improprieties first, those are the hardest to argue with. Then the discrimination documentation. Then the buried projects and broken promises. And the recording? Sophia felt her stomach clench. The recording was their nuclear option. James had been wearing a wire during that boardroom meeting. Every racist comment, every cruel laugh, every dismissive sneer was captured in crystal clear audio. Only if we need it. It's our insurance policy. James nodded, satisfied. Good. You've thought of everything. I've tried. Sophia set down the marker and rubbed her eyes. James, what if they have something on us? What if they've been preparing too? They don't know I'm coming. As far as Richard knows, I'm a senile old man who doesn't pay attention to the company anymore. But Victoria's been watching me. She knows something's going on. James' expression grew serious. What has she done? Nothing concrete, just watching. asking questions about my schedule, showing up in places she normally wouldn't be. Sophia wrapped her arms around herself. She's suspicious, I can feel it. Then we need to be more careful. No more meetings at the office. No more accessing files from your work computer. I know. I've been careful. I know you have. James stood and walked over to her. Sophia, whatever happens in that meeting, I want you to know I couldn't have done this without you. You've been extraordinary. Sophia felt warmth spread through her chest. I haven't done anything yet. You've done more than you know. You've reminded an old man what he was fighting for. James smiled. Eleanor would have loved you. You keep saying that because it's true. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. I want to give you something. Sophia frowned. James, I told you I don't want... It's not money. It's not a gift. It's... He opened the box. Inside was a simple silver pin, a small house with a rising sun behind it. This was Eleanor's. She wore it every day. She said it reminded her why we started Monarch, to give people homes, not just buildings. Sophia's breath caught. I can't accept this. You're not accepting it. You're carrying it forward. James pressed the box into her hands. Wear it to the shareholders' meeting. Let Eleanor be there with us. Sophia looked down at the pin, tears blurring her vision. Such a small thing. Such an enormous meaning. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you, Sophia, for everything. They stood there for a moment, an old man and a young woman bound together by a shared dream and a determination to see it through. Neither of them knew that their careful plans were about to be shattered. Victoria Price was not a stupid woman. She had clawed her way to the top of Monarch through a combination of talent, ruthlessness, and an uncanny ability to read people. She knew when someone was hiding something, and Sofia Delgado was definitely hiding something. For the past 2 weeks, Victoria had been watching. She'd noticed Sophia staying late at the office. She'd noticed the careful way Sophia avoided eye contact with her. She'd noticed the subtle change in Sophia's demeanor, less beaten down, more determined. Something was going on, and Victoria intended to find out what. She started with Sophia's computer, a quick word to IT, a fabricated concern about security protocols. And Victoria had access to Sophia's email history. Most of it was mundane. Work assignments, messages to her mother, the occasional conversation with Marcus Chen. But there were gaps. Periods where Sophia had clearly been communicating with someone but no record existed. Either she was using a personal device or she was deleting messages. Victoria dug deeper. She pulled Sophia's keycard records and found something interesting. Sophia had been accessing the building after hours, going to floors she had no reason to visit, including the executive floor. Why would a junior architect need to visit the executive floor at 11 p.m.? Victoria's next step was surveillance. She had a contact in building security who owed her a favor. A few days later, she had footage of Sophia meeting with an older man in the parking garage. They talked for 20 minutes, then left in separate cars. The footage was grainy, but Victoria enhanced it as much as she could. The man looked familiar somehow, but she couldn't place him. He was dressed simply. Work clothes, nothing fancy. Definitely not a client. She ran the image through Monarch's employee database. No match. She ran it through a facial recognition service she subscribed to. Still nothing. Frustrated, Victoria decided to try a different approach. She started asking around about Sophia's personal life. Did she have a boyfriend, a mentor, anyone who might be helping her with something? The answers she got were all the same. Sophia kept to herself. No boyfriend, no close friends except Marcus Chen. No family connections to anyone powerful. But someone was helping her. Someone with access to information. Someone who knew things about Monarch that a junior architect shouldn't know. Victoria was still puzzling over this when her assistant brought in the mail. Among the usual documents was a large envelope marked Confidential V. Price. She opened it and found a single photograph. It was old, from the 1990s, based on the clothing and hairstyles. A company party of some kind. In the center of the frame was James Whitmore, younger but unmistakable, his arm around a beautiful Latina woman. Behind them, barely visible but definitely present, was a younger woman in a cleaning uniform. Carmen Delgado. Victoria stared at the photograph, her mind racing. James Whitmore had known Sophia's mother, had known her well enough to pose for a photograph with her in the background. And now Sophia was meeting secretly with an older man who didn't appear in any database. The pieces clicked into place. Victoria grabbed her phone and called Richard Ashworth. "Richard, we have a problem. Let's play a little game with those who only read the comments. Type pineapple in the comments. Only those who've read this far will understand." Now let's continue with the story. Sophia knew something was wrong the moment she walked into the office. It was 2 days before the shareholders' meeting. She'd spent the previous night doing final preparations with James, running through every scenario, making sure they were ready for anything. But the way people were looking at her, or rather not looking at her, sent a chill down her spine. Marcus caught her in the hallway. His face was pale. "Sophia, don't go to your desk." "What? Why?" "Victoria was here early. She and Richard were in her office for 2 hours and then—" Marcus swallowed. "They called HR and legal." Sophia's blood ran cold. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying you need to be careful. Something's happening and I don't think it's good." Before Sophia could respond, Victoria appeared at the end of the hallway. Her smile was sharp enough to cut glass. "Miss Delgado, how convenient. Richard would like to see you in the main conference room. Now." Sophia's heart was pounding, but she kept her voice steady. "What's this about?" "You'll find out. Come along." Sophia followed Victoria through the halls, aware of every eye that tracked their progress. Whatever was about to happen, it was going to be public. That was intentional. Victoria wanted everyone to see. The conference room was the same one where Sophia had given her Greenway Commons presentation 3 weeks ago. The same room where James had defended her. But this time, there was no friendly janitor in the corner. Richard Ashworth sat at the head of the table. Beside him was Harrison Wells. On the other side sat 2 people Sophia didn't recognize. A woman in a severe suit who had HR written all over her, and a man who was clearly a lawyer. "Miss Delgado, please sit." Richard gestured to a chair at the far end of the table, the position of maximum vulnerability. Sophia sat, her mind racing. What did they know? How much had they figured out? "Miss Delgado," Richard began, his voice dripping with false concern, "we've uncovered some very troubling information about your activities over the past few weeks." "What kind of activities?" "Let's start with this." Victoria slid a photograph across the table. It was a still from the security footage, Sophia and James in the parking garage. Sophia kept her face neutral. "I don't see the problem. I'm allowed to meet with people." "With whom exactly?" Victoria's eyes gleamed. "Because we've been unable to identify this individual. He doesn't appear in any of our databases. He's a friend, an old colleague of my mother's." "Is that so?" Richard reached into a folder and pulled out another photograph, the one from the 1990s with James and Eleanor and Carmen in the background. "Your mother certainly had interesting colleagues." Sophia felt her stomach drop. They knew. "Do you recognize the man in this photograph, Miss Delgado?" Victoria asked sweetly. Sophia said nothing. "Let me help you." That's James Whitmore, founder of this company. And the woman behind him? That's your mother. Victoria leaned forward. Quite a coincidence, don't you think? What exactly are you accusing me of? Richard took over, his voice hardening. We're accusing you of manipulating a vulnerable elderly man for personal gain. We believe you've used your mother's past connection to James Whitmore to gain his confidence, feed him false information, and convince him to take actions against the company's legitimate leadership. That's absurd, is it? Victoria pulled out another folder. We have documentation of your after-hours access to the executive floor. We have evidence that you've been copying confidential files. And we have reason to believe that you're planning to disrupt the shareholders' meeting with the help of a man who, frankly, may not be mentally competent to make his own decisions. Sophia's rage flared. James Whitmore is sharper than anyone in this room. So you admit you've been meeting with him? Richard smiled triumphantly. Sophia realized her mistake too late. Miss Delgado, the HR woman spoke for the first time. The allegations against you are extremely serious. Breach of confidentiality, corporate espionage, exploitation of a vulnerable individual. I haven't exploited anyone. That will be for the courts to decide. The lawyer opened his briefcase. We're prepared to pursue criminal charges if necessary. Sophia felt the walls closing in. This was worse than she'd imagined. They weren't just trying to fire her. They were trying to destroy her completely. And they were trying to use the attack on her to delegitimize James. Let me guess, she said, forcing her voice to remain steady. You're also going to pursue a conservatorship for James, declare him incompetent, strip him of his voting rights. The flicker in Richard's eyes told her she'd hit the mark. James Whitmore hasn't been involved in this company for 15 years, Richard said carefully. His sudden interest in company affairs, combined with his age and recent isolation, raises legitimate concerns about his judgment. His judgment is fine. His judgment is better than yours has ever been. That's not for you to decide. Richard stood, signaling that the meeting was over. Sofia Delgado, you're terminated, effective immediately. Security will escort you to collect your personal belongings. You're banned from all Monarch properties and functions, including the shareholders' meeting. Any attempt to contact James Whitmore will be considered harassment and will be reported to the authorities. Sophia stood slowly, her legs trembling but her spine straight. You think this is over? She said quietly. You think firing me stops anything? I think it stops you. Victoria's smile was pure venom. Goodbye, Miss Delgado. Say hello to your mother for us. I understand she was quite the cleaning lady. Sophia walked out of the conference room with security on either side of her. She kept her head high, even as she felt the stares of her former colleagues. She collected her belongings, a small box that fit everything she'd accumulated in 3 years at Monarch, and was escorted to the front entrance. The security guard almost looked sorry. I'm sorry, miss. Orders. I know. Sophia took one last look at the building her mother had cleaned, the building she dreamed of designing, the building that was now barred to her forever. Then she walked away. She made it 2 blocks before she broke down. Standing in an alley behind a coffee shop, Sophia sobbed like she hadn't sobbed since she was a child. All the fear, all the anger, all the frustration came pouring out in waves that left her gasping. They'd taken everything, her job, her reputation, her chance to be part of the shareholders' meeting. They were going to use her as a weapon against James, paint her as a manipulator, a criminal, someone who preyed on elderly men. And the worst part was she couldn't prove them wrong, not from the outside, not without access to the evidence she and James had gathered. Her phone buzzed, a text from James. I heard what happened. Where are you? she typed back with shaking hands. "Alley behind Pete's Coffee on Market Street. Stay there. I'm coming." 20 minutes later, James's car pulled up to the curb. He got out and immediately pulled Sophia into a hug. "I'm so sorry," he said. "This is my fault. I should have anticipated." "It's not your fault." Sophia pulled back, wiping her eyes. "They found the photo. The one of you and Eleanor and my mother. They put it together." Victoria was always clever. James's jaw tightened. "What exactly did they accuse you of?" Sophia told him everything. The allegations of elder manipulation, the threats of criminal charges, the obvious plan to declare him incompetent. "They're scared," James said when she finished. "They know I'm a threat. This is them trying to neutralize me before the meeting. They banned me from the shareholders' meeting. I can't be there to present the evidence. You don't need to be there, I'll present it myself. But we planned this together. It was supposed to be both of us, and it still will be, just differently than we expected." James took her hands. "Sophia, listen to me. They think they've won. They think firing you cuts me off from the evidence, from the plan, from everything we've built. But they're wrong." "How?" "Because I have copies of everything, because my lawyers have been preparing for this possibility. And because," he squeezed her hands, "because I was never going to let you take the fall for this. If anyone was going to face their wrath, it was going to be me." Sophia shook her head. "I won't let you do this alone. You're not letting me do anything. I'm choosing to do it." James's eyes were fierce. "You've already done more than I could have asked. Now let me finish what we started. And what am I supposed to do? Sit at home while you face them alone? No. I have something else in mind." James pulled out his phone. "I've been in contact with a journalist, someone who's been investigating Monarch for years but could never get anyone to go on record. She's been waiting for this story. You want me to talk to the press? I want you to tell your story. Not the evidence against Richard and Victoria, I'll handle that at the meeting. But your story. What they did to you, what they said. How they treated you because of who you are and where you come from." Sophia felt a chill. "They'll destroy me. They've already tried. What more can they do?" James met her eyes. "Sophia, the court of public opinion matters. If people see what Monarch has become, what Richard and Victoria have turned it into, they won't just lose their jobs, they'll lose everything." Sophia thought about it. Thought about the racist comments in the boardroom. Thought about Victoria's smirk as she mentioned Sophia's mother. Thought about every time she'd been made to feel small, unworthy, unwelcome. "Okay," she said finally. "I'll do it." James nodded. "The meeting is in 2 days. Can you be ready by then?" "I'll be ready." "Good." He handed her a business card. "This is the journalist. Her name is Rachel Torres. She's expecting your call." Sophia took the card, her hands still trembling but her resolve solidifying. "James, what if it doesn't work? What if they really do have you declared incompetent? Then I go down fighting." James smiled, a warrior's smile. "But I don't think it will come to that. Richard and Victoria have spent 15 years forgetting who I am. On Wednesday, I'm going to remind them." He got back in his car and drove away, leaving Sophia standing on the street corner with a business card and a burning determination. They had taken her job. They had threatened her freedom. They had tried to make her feel worthless, but they had made one critical mistake. They had assumed that firing her would stop her. They were about to learn how wrong they were. That night, Sophia met with Rachel Torres at a quiet restaurant in the Mission District. Rachel was in her 40s, sharp-eyed and intense, with the kind of energy that came from years of chasing stories that powerful people didn't want told. "James Whitmore vouches for you," Rachel said, sipping her coffee. "That's not nothing. I've been trying to get someone inside Monarch to talk for 5 years. I'm not inside anymore. Even better. Now you have nothing to lose. Sophia told her everything. The boardroom humiliation, the racist comments, Victoria's targeting of diverse employees, the abandoned affordable housing project, her firing and the trumped-up charges. Rachel recorded it all, her expression growing grimmer with each revelation. "This is explosive," she said when Sophia finished. "If even half of what you're saying is true, Monarch is looking at a PR nightmare. It's all true, and I have evidence. Can you share it?" Sophia hesitated. The evidence was technically James's, compiled from his access as majority shareholder. She wasn't sure she had the right to give it to a journalist. "I need to check with James first." "Fair enough." Rachel closed her notebook. "The shareholders' meeting is Wednesday. I'm going to be there. If things go the way you say they will, I'll have a story ready to publish within the hour. And if they don't, then I'll publish your story anyway. Either way, the world is going to know what Monarch really is." Sophia nodded slowly. "Thank you for believing me." "Don't thank me yet. If this goes wrong, they'll come after both of us." Rachel smiled grimly. "But that's the job. Sometimes you have to kick the hornet's nest to see what flies out." They shook hands and parted ways. Sophia walked home through the fog-shrouded streets, Eleanor's pin clutched in her pocket. In 48 hours, everything would change. One way or another. What do you think of Victoria's trap? Will James be able to save Sophia and Monarch? Share your thoughts in the comments. On a scale from 0 to 10, how would you rate this story so far? Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications to keep up with all our stories. The morning of the shareholders' meeting dawned gray and cold. Sophia woke early, unable to sleep. She'd spent most of the night going over everything with Rachel Torres, providing documentation, answering questions, preparing for the story that would run regardless of what happened at the meeting. Now, all she could do was wait. She made coffee and sat at the kitchen table staring at her phone. James had promised to text her updates, but the meeting didn't start until 10 a.m. That was still 3 hours away. Carmen emerged from her bedroom wrapped in her old robe. "Mija, you're up early." "Couldn't sleep." Carmen sat down across from her, studying her daughter's face with the practiced eye of a mother who always knew when something was wrong. "Today is the day, isn't it? The meeting you've been preparing for?" Sophia nodded. She hadn't told her mother everything, just that James was going to make some changes at the company. Carmen didn't need to know about the accusations, the threats, the war that was about to erupt. "You're not going?" "I can't. I'm not allowed." Carmen reached across the table and took Sophia's hand. "Then why do you look like you're going into battle?" Sophia smiled despite herself. Her mother always saw through her. "Because even if I'm not there, I'm part of it. James is fighting for me too, for what they did to me." Carmen was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "When I worked at Monarch, I saw many powerful men. Men who thought they were important because they had money and titles. Most of them looked right through me like I was part of the furniture." "I know, Mama. But James Whitmore was different. He saw me. He remembered my name, asked about you, made sure I had what I needed." Carmen's eyes grew misty. "He's a good man, Sophia. Whatever happens today, remember that you have a good man fighting beside you." Sophia squeezed her mother's hand. "I know." "And remember something else." Carmen's voice grew fierce. "You are Sofia Delgado. You are the daughter of a woman who crossed oceans and cleaned floors and never gave up. You have faced worse than these people, and you are still standing. Whatever they throw at you, you throw it back harder." Sophia laughed through the tears that were threatening to spill. "Where did that come from?" From 30 years of watching rich people think they're better than everyone else. Carmen stood and kissed Sophia's forehead. Now eat something, you can't fight on an empty stomach. Sophia obeyed, forcing down toast she didn't taste. At 9:45, her phone buzzed. James. Heading in now. Whatever happens, know that I'm proud of you. Sophia typed back, give them hell. James. With pleasure. The grand ballroom of the St. Regis Hotel was filled to capacity. Over 300 shareholders had gathered for Monarch's annual meeting, along with financial analysts, members of the press, and various executives and board members. The room hummed with conversation as people took their seats, sipped coffee, and reviewed the glossy packets of information that had been distributed at the door. At the front of the room, a raised platform held a long table where the board of directors sat in a row. Richard Ashworth occupied the center chair, flanked by Victoria Price and Harrison Wells. They looked confident, relaxed, completely in control. Richard had spent the past 2 days preparing for this moment. He'd reviewed every possible scenario, consulted with lawyers, and made sure that James Whitmore's potential appearance was covered. If the old man showed up, Richard was ready. He had documentation of James's 15-year absence. He had statements from doctors expressing concern about an elderly man's sudden interest in business affairs. He had the accusations against Sofia Delgado, ready to deploy as evidence of James's poor judgment. Nothing could go wrong. At exactly 10 a.m., Richard stood and approached the podium. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Monarch Development Corporation's annual shareholders meeting. I'm Richard Ashworth, CEO, and I'm pleased to report that despite challenging market conditions, Monarch has had another successful year. He launched into his prepared remarks. The usual corporate boilerplate about growth, innovation, and shareholder value. The audience listened politely, some taking notes, others checking their phones. 20 minutes in, Richard was wrapping up his financial summary. And so, with careful stewardship and strategic leadership, Monarch is well positioned for continued success. Before we move to the formal business of the meeting, I do need to address a difficult matter. He paused, letting the room grow quiet. It has come to our attention that there may be attempts to disrupt today's proceedings. We've received credible information that certain individuals, including a former employee who was recently terminated for cause, may try to present false accusations against this board. Murmurs rippled through the audience. Journalists perked up, sensing a story. I want to assure you that these accusations are baseless. They appear to be part of a coordinated campaign to manipulate a long-absent shareholder whose judgment may have been compromised by age and isolation. We take the protection of our shareholders very seriously, and we will not allow... The doors at the back of the ballroom swung open. Every head turned. James Whitmore walked in. He was not dressed in work clothes today. He wore a perfectly tailored charcoal suit, a crisp white shirt, and a tie that matched the deep blue of Monarch's logo. His silver hair was neatly combed. His posture was straight and commanding. He looked exactly like what he was, the founder of a billion-dollar company. Behind him walked a small army, 3 lawyers in dark suits, 2 forensic accountants carrying briefcases, and Rachel Torres with a press badge around her neck and a hungry gleam in her eyes. The room erupted in whispers. Richard's face went pale, but he recovered quickly. James, what a surprise. We weren't expecting you. Clearly, James walked down the center aisle, his footsteps echoing in the sudden hush. Please continue, Richard. You were saying something about my compromised judgment? Richard's jaw tightened. James, this is highly irregular. The agenda has been set. The agenda can wait. James reached the front of the room and turned to face the audience. My name is James Whitmore. For those who don't know me, I founded this company 40 years ago. I own 53% of its shares. And I have some things to say. James, perhaps we should discuss this privately. We've had 15 years to discuss things privately, Richard. 15 years during which you've run my company into the ground. I think it's time for a public conversation. The room was electric. Shareholders leaned forward, sensing something extraordinary was about to happen. Journalists were already taking notes. Richard tried one more time. James, I understand you're upset about recent events, but I have to express concern about your state of mind. We've all read the reports about elderly individuals being manipulated by whom? James cut him off. By Sofia Delgado, the young architect you fired 2 days ago on fabricated charges. Those charges are not fabricated. She was accessing confidential files, meeting with you secretly. She was helping me investigate corruption at my own company. Something you would know if you'd bothered to ask instead of trying to destroy her. James turned to his legal team and nodded. One of the lawyers stepped forward with a thick folder. I'd like to present some evidence to the shareholders, James said. Evidence of systematic misconduct by this board over the past 15 years. Richard's face went from pale to purple. You have no right. I have every right. As majority shareholder, I'm invoking my authority to call an emergency session. All in favor? Hands went up throughout the room. The smaller shareholders might not know what was happening, but they could smell blood in the water and they wanted to see what was coming. Motion carries. James turned to face the board table. Now where shall we begin? What followed was a systematic dismantling of everything Richard Ashworth had built. James presented the financial evidence first. Inflated contracts awarded to companies in which board members held secret stakes. Expense accounts that would make a Saudi prince blush. Bonuses paid out even in years when the company lost money. Over the past decade, James said, clicking through slide after slide, this board has diverted approximately $47 million to personal interests. That's $47 million that should have gone to shareholders, to employees, to actual development projects. The murmurs grew louder. Several shareholders were on their phones, probably calling their lawyers. But financial impropriety is only part of the story. James clicked to a new section. Let's talk about how this board has treated the people who actually work for this company. The discrimination evidence was damning. Promotion rates broken down by race and gender. Termination records showing a clear pattern of targeting diverse employees. Emails, dozens of them, containing language that ranged from insensitive to outright racist. Victoria shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Her name appeared on many of those emails. Over the past 6 years, James continued, Monarch has lost 37% of its non-white employees, not through normal attrition, through systematic exclusion, through being passed over for promotions they deserved, through being told they weren't a cultural fit or didn't have executive presence. He paused, letting the words sink in. And this brings me to Sofia Delgado. The room grew even quieter. 3 weeks ago, Sofia Delgado presented a project to this board. A sustainable, affordable housing development that could have provided homes for over 2,000 families. It was one of the most innovative proposals I've seen in 20 years of following this industry. James clicked to a slide showing Sofia's Greenway Commons designs. Even on a projection screen, they were beautiful. Clean lines, green spaces, the kind of thoughtful design that elevated architecture into art. This board rejected it, not because of its merits, but because of who proposed it. A young Latina architect from a working-class background. He clicked to another slide. This one showed a transcript. I happened to be in the room that day, doing maintenance work, and I heard what this board said to Sofia Delgado. James pressed play on an audio file. Richard's voice filled the room. Someone from your background couldn't possibly understand what our clients want. Then Victoria. Perhaps you'd be more comfortable designing something within your cultural experience. Taquerias, perhaps? Gasps echoed through the ballroom. Several people covered their mouths in shock. Rachel Torres was writing furiously. The recording continued, every racist comment, every dismissive laugh, every moment of cruelty preserved in crystal-clear audio. When it ended, the silence was absolute. James turned to face the board directly. Victoria had gone white. Harrison was staring at the table. Richard was gripping the arms of his chair so hard his knuckles had turned pale. "This," James said quietly, "is what my company has become. This is what I allowed to happen by stepping away, by trusting people who had no business being trusted." He walked toward the board table, his footsteps echoing in the silence. Richard Ashworth, Victoria Price, Harrison Wells. Each of them flinched as he said their names. "You are terminated, effective immediately. You will vacate your offices by end of business today. Your severance packages are void due to breach of fiduciary duty and violation of company policy. Any attempt to contest these terminations will be met with the full force of my legal team, and I assure you, you cannot afford the lawyers I can afford." Richard stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "You can't do this, James. We have contracts. We have rights. We'll sue. Sue me. Please." James's smile was cold. "I've been waiting 15 years to have this conversation in a courtroom. I have documentation of every corrupt deal you've made, every discriminatory decision you've approved, every dollar you've stolen from this company. By the time my lawyers are done with you, you won't be able to afford a studio apartment, let alone a lawsuit." Victoria found her voice. "This is slander. You're making accusations based on the word of a disgruntled former employee. I'm making accusations based on evidence I gathered myself over 3 months, while I was pretending to be a janitor in my own building." James turned to address the shareholders again. "I've been watching this company from the inside. I've seen how employees are treated. I've seen the fear, the favoritism, the systematic destruction of everything Monarch was supposed to stand for." He pointed at the board members. "These people turned my company into a playground for the wealthy. They abandoned the communities we were supposed to serve. They drove out talented people because they didn't fit a narrow definition of culture. And when a brilliant young architect dared to remind them what Monarch could be, they humiliated her and fired her." James's voice rose. "Well, that ends today. Sofia Delgado is not a criminal. She is not a manipulator. She is exactly the kind of person Monarch was created to elevate. And she will be part of this company's future." He turned to the audience. "Shareholders, I'm asking for your support in a complete restructuring of Monarch's leadership. New board members who understand our founding mission. New executives who will treat every employee with dignity. And a renewed commitment to the communities we should have been serving all along." He paused. "All in favor?" The vote wasn't even close. Hands went up throughout the room. Large institutional shareholders, small individual investors, everyone who had listened to the evidence and understood what it meant. "Motion carries." James nodded to his security team. "Please escort the former board members from the premises." What happened next would be talked about in San Francisco business circles for years. Richard Ashworth, who had ruled Monarch with an iron fist for 15 years, was escorted out of the ballroom by security guards. Victoria Price followed, her designer heels clicking a rapid staccato as she tried to maintain some dignity. Harrison Wells went quietly, his head bowed. The remaining board members, the ones who hadn't been directly implicated, sat in stunned silence. James returned to the podium. "I know this has been unusual," he said, allowing himself a small smile. "But I want to assure you that Monarch is in good hands. I'll be resuming an active role in company operations, at least temporarily. And I've already identified candidates for the empty board positions. People who share our founding values and understand what architecture should really be about." He paused, his expression softening. "For too long, this company forgot its purpose. We forgot that architecture isn't just about buildings. It's about giving people homes, places where they can raise families, build communities, create lives. The fancy towers and luxury developments will always have clients. But the people who need us most, the working families, the first-time homeowners, the communities that have been overlooked, they deserve our attention too." He clicked to a final slide. It showed Sophia's Greenway Commons project again, but this time with a banner across it. Approved. Greenway Commons will be Monarch's next major development. It will be led by Sofia Delgado, who will be joining us as Director of Sustainable Development, and it will be the first of many projects that return this company to its roots. The applause that erupted was genuine and sustained. James stepped away from the podium, suddenly looking his age. The adrenaline that had carried him through the confrontation was fading, leaving an exhausted but satisfied old man. One of his lawyers approached. "Sir, the press is asking for comments. Give them Rachel Torres's contact information. She has everything she needs." James pulled out his phone. "But first, I need to make a call." Sophia was pacing her apartment when her phone rang. She'd been watching the news, refreshing Twitter, trying to get any information about what was happening at the meeting. But nothing had leaked yet. The ballroom was apparently locked down. When she saw James's name on the screen, she nearly dropped the phone. "James, what happened? Are you okay?" "I'm fine." She could hear the exhaustion in his voice, but also something else. Triumph. "It's done, Sophia. They're gone. All of them." Sophia sank into a chair, her legs suddenly weak. "What?" "Richard, Victoria, Harrison, they've been terminated. Security escorted them out about 10 minutes ago." "Oh my God." Sophia felt tears streaming down her face. "Oh my God." "I played the recording, the whole thing. Everyone heard what they said to you. And Greenway Commons has been approved. You're going to build it, Sophia. Every unit, every green space, every solar panel, exactly the way you designed it." Sophia couldn't speak. She was crying too hard. "There's one more thing," James said. "You're being offered the position of Director of Sustainable Development. You'll report directly to me, and you'll have full authority to build the division however you see fit." "James, I don't know what to say." "Say yes." Sophia laughed through her tears. "Yes, yes, of course, yes." "Good, now get down here. There's a lot of press, and they want to meet the woman who helped bring down Monarch's corrupt leadership." "I'm on my way." Sophia hung up and sat for a moment, trying to process what had just happened. Then she grabbed Eleanor's pin from her nightstand, fastened it to her jacket, and headed for the door. Carmen caught her in the hallway. "Mija, what's happening? You're crying." "Good tears, Mama." Sophia hugged her mother tightly. "The best tears. I have to go. I'll explain everything later." "Go where?" Sophia smiled, a real smile, the biggest she'd felt in weeks. "To start my new job. What do you think of James's confrontation with the board? Share your thoughts in the comments. On a scale from 0 to 10, how would you rate this story so far? Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications to keep up with all our stories. The aftermath of the shareholders' meeting was chaos, the best kind of chaos. Rachel Torres's story broke within the hour. Billionaire founder fires entire board after racist recording surfaces. The article included quotes from James, excerpts from the audio recording, and Sophia's account of her humiliation and wrongful termination. By evening, it was the most read story on every major news site. Richard Ashworth, Victoria Price, and Harrison Wells were photographed leaving Monarch headquarters with boxes of personal belongings, their faces tight with humiliation. Within days, they were facing not just unemployment, but a cascade of legal troubles, shareholder lawsuits, regulatory investigations, and criminal referrals for financial impropriety. Victoria's fall was particularly spectacular. The emails documenting her discrimination became public during discovery for one of the lawsuits, and suddenly every company that had ever considered hiring her had second thoughts. Last anyone heard, she'd left San Francisco entirely, trying to reinvent herself somewhere no one knew her name. But Sophia barely noticed any of that. She was too busy building. The first 6 months as Director of Sustainable Development were the most intense of Sophia's life. She assembled a team, finalized the Greenway Commons designs, secured permits, negotiated with contractors, and navigated the 1,000 small crises that came with any major development project. James was there every step of the way, not hovering but available. He reviewed her decisions when she asked, offered advice when she sought it, and defended her authority when anyone questioned whether a 28-year-old should be running such a major initiative. "She's exactly who she needs to be," he told a skeptical investor during one early meeting. "Stop looking at her age and start looking at her work." The investor had looked, and eventually he'd invested. Greenway Commons broke ground on a crisp October morning, exactly 1 year after Sophia's disastrous board presentation. The ceremony was held on the construction site, the same kind of empty lot that had once represented Monarch's failures, now the foundation for something new. Sophia stood at the podium looking out at the crowd. City officials, community members, Monarch employees. Her mother in the front row dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief, and James standing slightly apart, watching with quiet pride. "1 year ago," Sophia began, "I stood in a boardroom and presented this project to people who told me it was worthless. They said affordable housing wasn't prestigious enough for Monarch. They said I didn't understand what clients wanted. They said someone from my background couldn't possibly belong in their world." She paused, letting the memory wash over her. They were wrong. Not just about me, about everything. They were wrong about what architecture should be. Wrong about who deserves beautiful homes. Wrong about what this company was supposed to stand for. Sophia gestured at the site around her. "Greenway Commons will provide homes for over 2,000 families. Working families. Families like the one I grew up in. Families where parents work double shifts so their kids can do homework in peace. Families who have been told their whole lives that nice things aren't for people like them." Her voice strengthened. "Well, this is for them. Every unit. Every green space. Every solar panel and community garden and thoughtfully designed corner. This is proof that you don't have to choose between beautiful and affordable. That dignity isn't a luxury. That everyone deserves a home they can be proud of." She looked at her mother. "My mama cleaned buildings for 30 years so I could design them. This project is for her. And for every cleaning lady and janitor and security guard who's ever been made to feel invisible by the people whose messes they clean up." Sophia turned to James. "And it's for the man who never forgot where he came from. Who built a company on the belief that architecture should serve everyone, who walked into a boardroom dressed as a maintenance worker and stood up for me when no one else would." She smiled through her tears. "James Whitmore saw me when I was invisible. He believed in me when I didn't believe in myself, and he trusted me with his legacy, the most precious gift anyone has ever given me." Sophia picked up a ceremonial shovel. "So let's build something worthy of that trust." The applause was thunderous. Sophia drove the shovel into the earth, officially breaking ground on Greenway Commons. Afterward, James found her by the refreshment table, still accepting congratulations from a stream of well-wishers. "Beautiful speech," he said when they finally had a moment alone. "I meant every word." "I know you did." James's eyes were misty. "Eleanor would have loved this day. She would have loved you. I wish I could have met her." "You did, in a way. Her spirit is in everything Monarch was supposed to be, everything you're building now." James reached into his pocket. "Speaking of which, I have something for you." He handed her an envelope. Sophia opened it and found legal documents, dense, complicated pages that took her a moment to parse. "James, what is this?" "It's a trust, structured so that you'll earn ownership shares in Monarch based on performance milestones over the next 10 years. He smiled at her shocked expression. "I'm not giving you the company, you're earning it. But I wanted to make sure that no matter what happens to me, you have the resources to carry on the mission." "James, I can't." "You can, and you will." He took her hands. "Sophia, I'm 66 years old. I've had a good life, better than I deserved in many ways, but I don't have children. I don't have anyone to leave this to except the company itself." His voice softened. "You're my legacy now. You and everything you're going to build. I want to make sure you have every tool you need to succeed." Sophia was crying openly now. She hugged James tightly, not caring who saw. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." "Thank you," he replied, "for reminding an old man why he started all this in the first place." Construction on Greenway Commons proceeded smoothly, or as smoothly as any major development project could. There were challenges, of course, supply chain issues, weather delays. A contractor who had to be replaced when his work didn't meet standards. The usual parade of small crises that came with building anything significant. But Sophia handled them all. She'd learned to trust her instincts, to surround herself with good people, to ask for help when she needed it, and stand firm when she didn't. James watched her grow from a nervous junior architect into a confident leader. He sat in on her meetings not to supervise but to learn, to see how the next generation approached problems he'd been solving for 40 years. "You're better at this than I was," he told her one evening after she'd navigated a particularly tricky negotiation with a city planning board. "I doubt that." "Don't. I was all fire and stubbornness at your age. You have those things too, but you also have patience, empathy, the ability to make people feel heard." He shook his head. "It took me decades to learn what you already know." Sophia smiled. "I had a good teacher. You had a lot of good teachers, your mother, your own experiences, the hard lessons of being underestimated your whole life." James patted her shoulder. "I just pointed you in the right direction. You did the rest." As the months passed, Sophia's role at Monarch expanded beyond Greenway Commons. She was invited to join the new board of directors, the youngest member by 20 years. She launched a mentorship program for architects from underrepresented backgrounds. She established partnerships with community organizations that had never been on Monarch's radar before. The company was transforming, and Sophia was at the heart of it. But she never forgot where she came from. Every Friday afternoon, she left the office early to have dinner with her mother. They'd cook together in Carmen's new apartment, a bright modern unit that Sophia had insisted on providing once her salary allowed it. "You work too hard," Carmen would say, stirring a pot of pozole or rolling tamales for some upcoming holiday. "I learned it from you. I worked hard because I had to. You work hard because you choose to." Carmen would shake her head, but she was always smiling. "Just don't forget to live, mija. Success means nothing if you don't have people to share it with." Sophia took her mother's advice to heart. She reconnected with old friends from architecture school. She started dating again, carefully, slowly, always wondering if people were interested in her or in what she'd become. Eventually, she met someone who saw her clearly. Daniel Park, an urban planner who worked for the city. They'd first crossed paths during a contentious zoning meeting, arguing on opposite sides of an issue. But something about the way he challenged her, respectfully, thoughtfully, without condescension, made her want to know more. Their first date was coffee. Their second was a walk through a neighborhood Daniel was trying to revitalize. By the third, Sophia knew she'd found something real. "He's a good man," Carmen pronounced after meeting Daniel for the first time. "He looks at you the way your father used to look at me. You never talk about Papa. Because it hurts. But the good memories, those are worth keeping." Carmen smiled. "Daniel reminds me of the good memories." 2 years after breaking ground, Greenway Commons was complete. The development was everything Sophia had imagined and more. Clean, modern buildings with warm touches that made them feel like home. Green spaces where children could play and neighbors could gather. Solar panels gleaming on every roof, generating clean energy for the community. And the families. God, the families. Sophia attended the move-in day for the first residents, watching as people carried boxes and furniture into homes they'd never thought they could afford. She saw children running through the courtyards, exploring their new neighborhood. She saw parents standing in living rooms, looking around in disbelief. One woman approached Sophia with tears streaming down her face. "I've been on waiting lists for years," she said. "I'd given up. And then this place, it's beautiful. I never thought my kids would live somewhere beautiful." Sophia hugged her, crying too. "That's why we built it. For people exactly like you." The grand opening ceremony was held the following week. Everyone came. City officials who had initially been skeptical of the project, investors who had taken a chance on Sophia's vision, community members who had advocated for years for this kind of development. The media, eager to cover the feel-good story of a young Latina architect's triumph over discrimination. And in the middle of it all, on a bench in the central courtyard, sat Carmen Delgado. Sophia had kept one secret from her mother throughout the entire construction process. Carmen knew about Greenway Commons, of course, had toured it multiple times, had met the contractors and the city planners. But she didn't know about one particular unit. After her speech, another tribute to her mother, to James, to everyone who had believed in her, Sophia took Carmen's hand. "Mama, I want to show you something." She led her mother through the development, past the community garden and the children's playground, to a corner unit on the ground floor. It had a small private patio, accessible for someone with arthritis. It was close to public transit, but quiet. It had been designed with very specific needs in mind. "What is this?" Carmen asked as Sophia unlocked the door. "Your new home." Carmen froze on the threshold. The unit was already furnished, simple, comfortable pieces that matched Carmen's taste. Family photos hung on the walls. Her favorite plants sat on the windowsill, transported from her old apartment. "Sophia," Carmen's voice was barely a whisper. "This is too much, I can't." "You spent 30 years cleaning buildings like this one, Mama. Buildings you were never allowed to live in. Buildings where you were invisible." Sophia pulled her mother inside, closing the door on the rest of the world. "This one is yours. Every brick, every window, every inch of it was built by your daughter for you." Carmen collapsed onto the sofa, sobbing. Sophia sat beside her, holding her mother the way Carmen had held Sophia through every childhood nightmare and heartbreak. "You gave me everything," Sophia said. "You sacrificed so much. Let me give you this, please." Carmen looked up, her face wet with tears. "I'm so proud of you, mija, so proud." "I know," You told me every day, even when I didn't believe it. Sophia smiled. Now I believe it. They sat together until the tears ran dry and the setting sun painted the room in shades of gold. That night, after the celebration had ended and the crowds had gone home, Sophia found James in the courtyard. He was sitting on a bench, looking up at the buildings with an expression she couldn't quite read. Satisfied, yes, but also something else. Wistful, maybe, or simply tired. You should be inside celebrating, Sophia said, sitting beside him. I've had enough celebrations for one lifetime. I'm happy to let you take this one. It's your celebration too. None of this would exist without you. James shook his head slowly. It would exist. Maybe not here, maybe not now. But someone like you would have found a way eventually. That's what remarkable people do. They find ways. Sophia leaned her head against his shoulder. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the lights come on in the apartments around them. James? Yes? What happens now? Now? He considered the question. Now you keep building, more projects like this one, more opportunities for people who've been overlooked. You take what we've started and you make it bigger, better, more than I ever imagined. And you? James was quiet for a long moment. I'm tired, Sophia. Good tired. The kind that comes from finishing something important. But tired nonetheless. He patted her hand. I think it might be time for me to step back. Really step back this time. Let you run things. Sophia's heart clenched. James, I'm not ready. You're more ready than you know. And I'll still be here when you need advice. I'm not disappearing, he smiled. I just think it's time to enjoy what's left of my life. Spend some time with Eleanor. Sophia understood what he meant. The cemetery where Eleanor was buried had become a regular destination for James. He went every Sunday, brought flowers, sat and talked to her for hours. She'd be so proud of what we built, Sophia said. She would. She is. James looked up at the stars. Somewhere she's looking down and saying, I told you so. She always said I worried too much. They laughed together, the sound echoing softly through the courtyard. James, thank you. For everything you've done for me and my family, I don't have words big enough. You don't need words. You showed me through your actions. That's always been enough. Let's play a little game with those who only read the comments. Type sunset in the comments. Only those who've read this far will understand. Now let's continue with the story. 3 years after Greenway Commons opened, Sofia Delgado became CEO of Monarch Development Corporation. James had announced his retirement at the annual shareholders meeting, citing his health and his desire to spend more time with the people who matter. But everyone knew the real reason. Sophia was ready. The transition was seamless. Sophia had been preparing for this moment for years, even if she hadn't always realized it. She knew the company inside and out. She knew the mission, and she had the trust of everyone who mattered. Her first act as CEO was to rename the Sustainable Housing Division. It became the Eleanor Whitmore Foundation, a non-profit arm of Monarch dedicated to building affordable homes for families in need. Her second act was to break ground on a new project, a mixed-use development in Oakland, on the same site where James had built his first affordable housing project 40 years ago. Full circle, James said when she told him about it. Eleanor would have loved that. I hope so. I'm naming the community center after you both. You don't have to. I want to. The Eleanor and James Whitmore Community Center, a place for families to gather, for kids to learn, for communities to grow. Sophia smiled. It's the least I can do for the people who made all this possible. James didn't argue. He just hugged her, his eyes bright with tears. Under Sophia's leadership, Monarch flourished. Not just financially, though the company certainly did well, but in ways that mattered more. They built homes for people who needed them. They trained young architects from diverse backgrounds. They proved over and over again that doing good and doing well weren't mutually exclusive. Sophia was featured in Forbes, in Architectural Digest, in Time magazine's 100 Most Influential People issue. She was invited to speak at conferences in universities and congressional hearings on housing policy. But she never forgot who she was. Every Friday, she still had dinner with her mother. Every Sunday, she visited the Greenway Commons community garden, where Carmen had become a regular fixture, teaching neighborhood kids how to grow tomatoes and peppers. And every time she felt overwhelmed, every time the weight of responsibility threatened to crush her, she touched the silver pin on her lapel. The little house with the rising sun. Eleanor's pin. Her talisman. Her reminder. Her promise. The call came on a Tuesday morning in March. Sophia was in a meeting when her assistant interrupted with an urgent message. She excused herself and took the call in the hallway, already knowing from her assistant's face that something was terribly wrong. Sophia. It was James's housekeeper, Maria. Her voice was shaking. "You need to come. It's Mr. Whitmore. He's had a heart attack." Sophia was at the hospital within 20 minutes. James was conscious but weak, propped up in a bed surrounded by machines that beeped and hummed. When he saw Sophia, he smiled, that same gentle smile he'd given her the day they met. "You came." "Of course I came." Sophia pulled a chair to his bedside and took his hand. "How are you feeling?" "Old," he laughed, which turned into a cough. "I suppose this was bound to happen eventually. The doctors say you need to rest, that you pushed yourself too hard." "I pushed myself exactly as hard as I needed to." James squeezed her hand. "I got to see everything I wanted to see. Greenway Commons, your success, the company back on track." His eyes grew misty. "I got to see you become everything I knew you could be." "James, don't talk like that. You're going to be fine. The doctors are saying what doctors say, but I know my body." He met her eyes. "I'm not afraid, Sophia. I've had a good life, a full life. And thanks to you, I'm leaving something behind that matters." Sophia was crying now, unable to stop the tears. "You saved me, James. You saw me when no one else did. You believed in me when I was invisible." "You were never invisible. You just hadn't found your light yet." James touched her face with a trembling hand. "Promise me something. Anything. Promise me you'll keep building. Not just buildings, people. The way I tried to build you. Find the ones who've been overlooked and give them a chance. That's the real legacy. Not the structures, the people. I promise. And promise me you'll be happy. Find love. Have a family. Don't make the mistake I made, throwing yourself into work until there's nothing else left." Sophia thought of Daniel. They'd been together for 2 years now, talking about marriage, about children, about a future that seemed bright and real and possible. "I promise," she said again. James smiled. "Good, then I can rest." He closed his eyes. The machines continued to beep. Sophia held his hand, watching his chest rise and fall, praying for more time. But time, as it always does, ran out. James Whitmore passed away 3 days later, peacefully, with Sophia by his side. The funeral was held at the Greenway Commons community garden. It wasn't what anyone expected for a billionaire. No cathedral, no celebrity mourners, no ostentatious display of wealth. Just a simple ceremony in the place he'd helped create, surrounded by the community he'd devoted his life to serving. Sophia delivered the eulogy. James Whitmore was not a perfect man. He made mistakes. He stepped away when he should have fought. He trusted people who didn't deserve his trust. She paused, looking out at the crowd, Employees, community members, friends, strangers whose lives had been touched by James's work. But he also did something that most people never manage. He looked at his mistakes and he fixed them. He saw what his company had become and he decided to change it. Not from a distance, not through lawyers and proxies, but by walking into the building himself and becoming invisible. Sophia touched the pin on her lapel. James Whitmore dressed as a janitor to find out the truth about his own company. He swept floors and changed light bulbs and watched the people who worked for him. And when he saw someone being mistreated, when he saw me being humiliated for who I was and where I came from, he stood up. He risked his cover, risked being fired from his own company to defend a junior architect he'd never met. Her voice cracked. That's who James Whitmore was, not a billionaire, not a founder, a man who saw people when they were invisible, a man who believed that everyone deserves dignity, a man who gave me everything I have today. She looked up at the sky, where clouds were parting to let through shafts of golden light. James, wherever you are, I hope Eleanor is with you. I hope you're telling her about everything we built. And I hope you know that your legacy will live on, not in buildings, but in the people you touched, the lives you changed, the world you made better just by being in it. Sophia stepped back from the podium. The garden was silent except for the sound of weeping. Then slowly, applause began. It built and built until every person present was on their feet, honoring the man who had meant so much to so many. Afterward, Sophia stood alone by the memorial plaque they'd installed. James Whitmore, 1959-2029, he gave people homes. Carmen found her there, took her hand, and led her back to the reception. He's at peace, Mija. I know. And he's proud of you. I know that too. Sophia looked around at the community James had helped create. Children playing on the grass, families gathered on benches, elderly residents tending to garden plots. Life, continuing, growing, building, just as James would have wanted. 1 year later, Sophia stood in the lobby of Monarch headquarters, a different woman than the one who'd walked into that boardroom 6 years ago. She was CEO now, had been for 3 years. Under her leadership, the company had built over 10,000 affordable housing units across California. The Eleanor Whitmore Foundation had become a national model for sustainable development, and the industry that had once dismissed her was now looking to her for guidance. But today wasn't about work. Today was about family. Daniel stood beside her, holding a squirming bundle in his arms. Their daughter, Eleanor Carmen Delgado Park, was 3 months old and already had her mother's dark eyes and her father's curious disposition. Carmen was there too, cooing at her granddaughter, looking younger and happier than Sophia had ever seen her. They were gathered for the unveiling of a new addition to the lobby, a bronze plaque that had been installed that morning. Sophia read the words out loud. In memory of James Whitmore, 1959-2029, founder, visionary, friend. He saw people when they were invisible. And in honor of Eleanor Whitmore, 1961-2009, the heart of everything we built. Architecture is love made visible. Sophia traced the words with her finger. He would have hated the attention, she said softly. But he would have loved the quote, Daniel replied. It's very him. Carmen reached out and touched the plaque. I cleaned these walls for 12 years. I never thought my daughter would own them. You made this possible, Mama. Everything I am comes from you. No, Mija. Carmen shook her head. Everything you are comes from you. I just swept the path. They laughed together, 3 generations of Delgado women in the lobby of a company that had once tried to make them invisible. Baby Eleanor gurgled and Sophia took her from Daniel's arms. See that, Mija? She whispered to her daughter. That was your namesake's husband. He thought he was done making a difference. Then he met your mama, and together we changed the world. She looked up at the soaring atrium, at the lights streaming through the windows, at the employees passing through on their way to build more homes for more families. "And now it's your turn," Sophia said. "To see people when they're invisible, to stand up when it's hard, to build things that matter." She kissed her daughter's forehead. "You come from a long line of builders, Eleanor. Cleaners and architects and dreamers. Don't ever forget that. Don't ever let anyone make you feel small." Baby Eleanor yawned, unimpressed by the weight of legacy being placed on her tiny shoulders. Sophia laughed and handed her back to Daniel. "Come on," she said, putting her arm around her mother. "Let's go home." They walked out of Monarch headquarters together, CEO and janitor's daughter, husband and wife, grandmother and grandchild. A family built from nothing, just like everything else Sofia Delgado had ever created. What did you think of Sophia and James's story? Share your thoughts in the comments. On a scale from 0 to 10, how would you rate this story? Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications to keep up with all our stories. And check out more inspiring stories by clicking right here on the screen.